Do not do this.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2 video. There's so much to talk about, even though it's still pretty early days in the Dance of the Dragons. We are actually moving towards open war. There are a ton of book references, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. The funny thing in real life is if you actually went to watch the episode the minute they released it, they didn't update the official title until a couple hours later while I was in the middle of making this video. So I had to go back to like the beginning and remake this part of the video. The official title is Rhaenyra the Cruel, which is a reference to Maegor with teats from the comics, which is what the small folk called her, thinking of her just like Maegor, like she was not a popular figure. During the episode, you hear one of the small folk say, Rhaenyra the Monstrous. That's a reference to Maegor the Monstrous, as in Maegor the Cruel. Because thanks to Otto Hightower, now everybody thinks that Rhaenyra was directly responsible for all this. But the episode largely focused on the reaction of the Greens and how Rhaenyra reacts to learning what happened, like what the next step is. But it's sort of set up for episode 3 and a lot of teasing of the taking of Harrenhal. A lot of people who've been asking about Daemon Targaryen will be happy to have heard the shout out at the end of the episode, like they finally mentioned Daemon Targaryen. But I think the way they explain it, my early theory, because Otto Hightower was like, I'll go back to Old Town, Daemon will listen to me, like he'll want some instruction. But then Alicent basically tells him to go to Highgarden, explaining why he's not going to go to Old Town and why we probably won't see Daemon. When he says Daemon might be of use to them in the future, I think that's them teasing that he might come back in a future season, like Season 3 or Season 4. The reason we haven't seen him this whole time is because he's been in Old Town since the time jump after his birth. Another weird detail is that they did not change the intro to update it for the events of Blood and Cheese. I was actually expecting them to do what they did last year, where they changed the intro just a little bit, or the same way they did during the original Game of Thrones series. Maybe at some point later this season, they'll update it with some extra scenes at the end, like they'll continue weaving the tapestry, adding new scenes to the end of it. The actual opening scene starts in the Red Keep, them reacting to the events of Blood and Cheese, Helena's servants carrying the bloody sheets out of her room, the Kingsguard interrogating everyone. Aemond returns to his room wearing a cloak, meaning he's been out in the city in Flea Bottom away from the castle. We find out what he's been up to later in the episode, though. I'll talk about that in a second because it gets super weird. They explain that they basically close the city gates so that nobody can get in or out until they find blood and cheese. Aegon, understandably, totally loses it. There's a lot you can say about him being a weak king who should have never sat on the Iron Throne, like even Otto Hightower now clearly regretting putting him on the Iron Throne, like was this a good idea? Maybe not so much. Even though it seems like he and Alicent always planned on Aegon being the king eventually, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like they prepared him very well for that. Even though in the final years before Viserys' death, for about 6 years, Otto Hightower was ruling the realm, or running the day-to-day administration of the realm by himself. All because Viserys had grown too ill to actually come to the small council meetings. So you think if he had this grand plan to put Aegon on the Iron Throne, he would have started bringing him to small council meetings in that time period to prepare him for the transition. But here's where we get to Aegon's relationship with baby Jaehaerys. So Ryan Condal said Aegon's major damage, very plain to see, like they were very obvious about it during Season 1, is that Aegon felt like Viserys never loved him growing up. Whereas Viserys was a very attentive father when Rhaenyra was growing up, when he was younger, he was also much healthier during that period too. By the time he remarries to Alicent Hightower and starts having all these children, like all the green children with her, his health has started to decline so much, and because he spent so much of his energy growing up raising Rhaenyra, he was kind of burnt out by the time the other kids rolled around. Just leave him to his model making and his history books. So he wasn't very attentive to his other children, even though he did care about them. He just wasn't as good at showing it as he was to Rhaenyra when she was growing up. So Ryan Condal said that when Aegon's twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, were born, even though he has all these own personal weaknesses, his vices, like all the degenerate stuff he got up to during Season 1, like the fighting pits in Flea Bottom with the bastard children, Aegon was determined to give Jaehaerys all the things that he felt like Viserys never gave him growing up, particularly attention. Which is why they had all those scenes at the beginning of episode 1 where he makes a big deal about bringing Jaehaerys to the small council meetings, even though he's clearly too young to understand what's going on. So Aegon loved him very dearly, did stuff like this on the regular. So that's why he takes his death so hard during the episode. Like, I mean, he would have taken it hard no matter what, but he cared about him way more than I think they let on, even though you only get to see a little bit of the scenes of them together. He loses it so much that he winds up smashing Viserys' model of the Valyrian freehold, which explains why it's not around in present day, even though technically Robert Baratheon got rid of pretty much all the Targaryen things around the Red Keep after Robert's Rebellion. There's some stuff like the dragon skulls that he kept in storage underneath the throne room, so like there's some things left over from the Targaryens' reign, but for the most part he wiped the Red Keep of all Targaryen things. Aegon then calls for open war, retaliation, revenge against Rhaenyra in the Blacks, despite Otto Hightower's request for caution. Notice how Alicent feels like she's somehow being punished, or they're all being punished for her misdeeds because she's been so chaste, so devout, and been such a goody two-shoes, doing what everybody told her to do her whole life, but now she's been getting it on with Criston Cole, and she feels like her sin, like she says a couple times in the episode, I have sinned, somehow has something to do with what happened to Jaehaerys. Notice how she and Criston Cole lied to Aegon when he asked them where they were when this happened. If you didn't hate Criston Cole before this episode, you definitely hate him after this episode, especially for what he did to Arryn. Another big death during the episode. Don't worry, I'll get to Cargill Bowl, like the Battle of the Cargill Twins. Really big moment from the books, but that doesn't happen until the end of the episode. Larys Strong manages to find Blood, puts him in the black cells. We find out that because Blood didn't know Cheese's actual name, he just knew that he was a rat catcher, Aegon, in retaliation, winds up having all the rat catchers in the Red Keep killed and strung up on the city walls. We'll remind you of what Joffrey did at the end of Season 1. To be fair, he did wind up killing Cheese, it's just that he didn't do it on purpose, just because he only got all of them. They did wind up showing us the dog that Cheese kicked, though, so people asking for justice for the dog, you can actually look at it as retaliation for kicking the dog and for his role in the killing of Jaehaerys. And Aegon winds up beating Blood to death with his scepter. One of the important details here, too, though, is that Otto Hightower says it doesn't actually matter if Rhaenyra had any hand in what went down, and in fact, kind of doesn't believe that Rhaenyra was behind it himself, but says that that doesn't matter because they can actually use it to their advantage, blaming everything on her by sending ravens out to the realm and letting everyone know that Rhaenyra was behind it. And even though you kind of feel sorry for him a little bit at the end of the episode, just a little bit, here in this moment here, he does seem kind of despicable when he wants to use Prince Jaehaerys' funeral just as a way to garner more support for the Greens, not because he feels like Jaehaerys deserved a funeral. He also essentially forces Alicent and Helaena to ride with the carriage so that it will actually garner more sympathy for them. You notice during the procession, too, they actually sew Jaehaerys' head back to his body. I can't show it here in the video just because YouTube does not like that kind of stuff. There are a couple weird scenes here with Helaena. It seems like she's generally just slowly having a panic attack while this is going on. I was kind of expecting her to maybe have a dragon dream or see something special in the crowd or like some vision that she recognized from one of her dragon dreams. The interesting thing about this is that if you rewatch episode 1, in her first scene, you can actually see Helaena making Jaehaerys' funeral shroud here without realizing why she's doing it or that he's going to die later that night. And even though they didn't include this in the English subtitles for the episode, I think they included in some of the foreign language subtitles, she actually whispers under her breath when they first walk into the room about the boy, which is her reciting part of the later conversation that she'll have with Blood and Cheese when they're in the middle of doing the deed. So it means that she saw Jaehaerys' death in one of her dragon dreams and sensed that she would need a funeral shroud, so she was just unconsciously making that. But the way the showrunner said that they treat the dragon dream she has on the show is that she's kind of like Bran when he first became the Three-Eyed Raven and got that giant info dump of all knowledge in the history of Westeros and had no way of actually discerning when things were happening or any context for how it all fit together. Sort of like becoming the internet without an actual search function. So Helaena has no context for the visions, the dragon dreams. She has no idea what some of them mean or when they're going to happen or if they're even real or not. Like she can't tell the difference between regular dreams and dragon dreams. She kind of lives in this dream-like world where reality isn't super clear to her, which is why she's always whispering her dragon dreams. But we find out that Otto Hightower's plan works exactly the way he thought it would. The small folks start to call Rhaenyra monstrous, which I think is a nod to Maegor with teats, as she's called in the books, like Maegor the monstrous. Back at Dragonstone, Rhaenyra learns what happened, and it sort of confirmed my suspicions that even if she were to tell everyone, nobody on the Black Council thinks that they would believe her. Like, your messages will not be received in good faith. It takes a little while for everyone to figure out that it was Daemon, but you notice that Rhaenys clocks it immediately, like she's staring right at him like, this was definitely your fault. He claims to Rhaenyra that he didn't tell them to kill Jaehaerys. I talked about this during my episode 1 video because they stopped short in the episode when they asked him, what should we do if we can't find Aemond? And I think the idea is that in that moment, he just told them a son for a son, not specifically to kill Jaehaerys, just a son for a son, like any son for a son. As they're having it out, Daemon reveals that his true belief is that Viserys was always afraid of him as the stronger son, but Rhaenyra calls foul, saying that that's ridiculous. And I think she's correct in all this. Like, I think Daemon is talking crazy. Like, Viserys wasn't afraid of him in that way. The reason why he passed him over as an heir is because he thought that Daemon would be terrible for the realm, like a terrible king. Daemon is just unwilling to accept that. But if it wasn't clear, he still does support her claim. She then asks Baela to patrol near King's Landing on Moondancer and watch in case they send forces against them or any of the dragons. That'll be important for later episodes, like why Baela would be in that part of the realm. The whole reason she's worried about it weakening her claim to the Iron Throne, a lot of people are curious about this, is the way the Greens will probably spin this to the rest of the realm, blaming her for everything, just saying that she meant to kill baby Jaehaerys, even though obviously she did not. In the books, they make it seem like she was openly despised by the small folk in most of the realm who nicknamed her Maegor with teats, so obviously she was not viewed in very positive light. The whole idea is that Matt Smith explained during this season is that his character has been getting really pent up just sitting around all these years. He's gotten older, fatter, and slower, and he can't stand it, and it's causing him to become unraveled. This leads to the big fallout between Daemon and Rhaenyra. She no longer trusts him. And as he's no longer welcome at the Black Council anymore, leaves on his dragon Caraxes to take Harrenhal because he made a huge point about this at the end of Season 1. Aemond was also talking about Harrenhal as this important strategic point earlier too. A lot of people also talking about this cool detail. Inside Aemond's room, he had a painting of the burning of Harrenhal on his wall. This is Aegon the Conqueror burning the castle with Balerion the Black Dread during the conquest. Daemon taking Harrenhal with Caraxes is a bit of a callback to that. Obviously, things play out very differently in this version, though. Daemon's whole plan was to use Harrenhal as a staging point to control the Riverlands in their larger effort to box the Greens into this part of the realm. The other big key is the support of the North and the Vale. House Stark, House Arryn, critical to the Blacks winning the war. The major problem with Harrenhal, though, and they kind of get into this during the episode, the castle's kind of a nightmare in and of itself for a number of different reasons. There's all kinds of references to this during the original Game of Thrones series, too. Not just the very infamous curse of Harrenhal, that anybody who actually holds the castle will meet with some untimely end. It's too big to garrison, too hard to defend by any army, and just completely impractical. So it's almost more of a liability than an asset in a war. We get a brief scene of Rhaenyra with her younger children with Daemon, Aegon III and Viserys II, just reminding you that she does have more children. Notice he's got a little tiny dragon toy too. Back at the Red Keep, the reason why Aegon doesn't want to see Helaena, stop and talk to her is because he's ashamed of what happened and still too angry to think about, he's still thinking about revenge first right now. Criston Cole sees them taking down Jaehaerys' crib with the bloodstains, starts to feel ashamed for his role in all this, why he wasn't there to actually protect her, and winds up ordering the hit on Rhaenyra from Arik Cargill. Like I said, if you didn't hate him before this particular conversation, you really hate him after this, because he just lays into Arik about honor, duty, purity, fidelity, all the things that he was remiss in, that he does not have now, he has no honor. One of the weird details they also reveal during this conversation when Arik is talking about is that Helaena has not been granted a sworn protector like the Queen normally would be. The Queen always has one. For instance, Criston Cole became Alicent's sworn protector when she became Queen, marrying Viserys. When she became Dowager Queen, he just continued to be her sworn protector. My early theory here is that Criston Cole actually prevented Helaena from getting a sworn protector because their bedchambers, Helena's and Alicent's, are close enough that if she had a sworn protector, that member of the Kingsguard would actually see what he was getting up to with Alicent. So in reality, he's even more to blame for what happened to Helaena and Jaehaerys during all this for Blood and Cheese. They also reveal in the behind the scenes that Alicent's room now is Rhaenyra's old room, so Criston Cole has gotten on with both of them in that room. It is meant to feel exactly as awkward as that sounds. Both of them, Alicent and Criston Cole, are still obsessed with Rhaenyra. Jace talks to Baela about fathers. He's also referring to his real father, Harwin Strong, when he mentions it. We also find that Baela knows about it and doesn't care. Oh, what about your other father, quote-unquote, Harwin? Then we find out what Aemond has been getting up to all these nights outside the Red Keep. He's been going to the brothel in Flea Bottom. This is the same mistress that we saw again during Season 1 who had joked at him, clowned on him for having lost his virginity at her brothel many years before this. And he has got all the weird mommy issues that you might think, like he talks to her about what things were like when people picked on him as a child. Notice he refuses to get it on with her in this space here with all these other people around, even though technically they're kind of sequestered from the rest of the people at the brothel. Just every bit as messed up in the head as you would expect him to be. We get that reunion between the Whole brothers, Adam and Alan, Corlys's bastards. Adam seems eager to participate in the war and work for Corlys, which I think is important because he also sees sea smoke flying overhead, and Adam is one of the Dragonseeds who has Targaryen blood in his veins and can claim a dragon. So they're just setting up the idea that he'll be one of the other Dragonseeds. We get more scenes with Jace and Baela. They seem pretty committed to each other, and I think what they're trying to do is just make them a bigger part of the actual story just in general, especially to set up potential major WTF moments in later seasons, so that the character moments for them eventually land way harder. Some of the biggest book changes that they've already talked about is for Baela and Rhaenyra just in general. They were not super active during the Dance of the Dragons in the books, so the show has given them way more plot either from other characters or just moments that they created whole cloth for the show that were not in the books, making them just a bigger part of the actual story. There were a lot of people that were also asking about the book plot for Jace up in the north because he spent way more time up there in the books. The omission of Sarah Snow as a character, all the rumors about his supposed relationship with her. I think the way the show presented it during episode 1, he did not have any relationship with her. If that had been the case, they probably would have had some small nod to her in the Winterfell scene before they went to the wall, like between her and Jace, or some joke between Jace and Cregan Stark about that relationship. And since they didn't do that, I just took that to mean that the show was just totally skipping out on that Jace-Sarah Snow plot. Probably to make him feel more committed to Baela so that he's not sleeping around all over the realm while he's still betrothed to Baela. In the books, they tell of Daemon still keeping Mysaria as his lover to present day. On the show, though, they made it seem like she totally hates his guts and they haven't seen each other in years. Daemon might have been sleeping around on her at some point during all these time jumps that we've had, but I think they've done this just to make Daemon in general feel more committed to Rhaenyra, despite the fact that he doesn't totally take her seriously as his queen. The way the showrunner clarified this is that Daemon supports her claim to the Iron Throne over the Greens, but mostly because he hates the Greens and wants them all dead, so he'll support Rhaenyra over them. But his whole feelings about her sitting on the Iron Throne are a little more complicated because he's still kind of upset that Viserys never viewed him as a legitimate heir, so he's still kind of wrestling with that all of these years later. So even though he's kind of on the outs with Rhaenyra right now, she still really needs him and his dragon, so he's still critical to the Blacks. All the small folk in King's Landing are pissed because of the ongoing blockade from Corlys's fleet and the taxation from the crown for the Greens and the idea that there will be an actual war, and they're just worried in general about how that's going to affect their daily lives. So there's a growing food shortage and just a supply shortage in general. And even if there weren't a war that people were worried about, like, an actual war, people might die, everybody generally tends to hate more taxes. That was what that little scene with the goats was about during episode 1. Otto Hightower had to remind Aegon that they need the extra food for the dragons, thus they needed the extra tax from the small folk taking a larger portion of their herds. Like, we're gonna need some extra food for the dragons, gonna have a bit of a war pretty soon. The show's been using Hugh Hammer as one of the POV characters for the small folk in all this, I think to show you why he might be sympathetic to Rhaenyra's side, and they also want to show you more of the plight of the small folk, because the small folk just in general become bigger characters in later seasons. Hugh Hammer himself is special in that he's a Dragonseed, like he's a Targaryen bastard, thus the white Targaryen hair. He's capable of riding dragons, so he can take one of the unclaimed dragons on Dragonstone, so he's just generally a very important character they're trying to set up. During episode 1, he revealed that he's a blacksmith in King's Landing. Aegon promised him, the people around him, all the supplies they needed. So when he eventually probably will fail to deliver on that, it's just another reason for Hugh Hammer to support Rhaenyra over him. We get a bunch of new scenes at the library at Dragonstone. Really happy to get some scenes here because we didn't get to see this during the original series. They're using the series to show you just in general different areas of familiar places, like different areas of the Red Keep, now Dragonstone. You have to imagine during this part of the timeline, at the height of the Targaryens' power, the library is full of Valyrian history and lore going back to Aegon the Conqueror and even before that, before he was born. Most of it was probably destroyed after Robert's Rebellion, especially after he gave this castle, Dragonstone, to Stannis, who would have had all the Targaryen things destroyed, with the exception of the map table. Like, we know the map table survived. In the background of this other room, we also have a very large skull of a dragon. Is probably Meraxes, just based on the way the history of Aegon's conquest played out. Meraxes is the white dragon ridden by his sister wife Rhaenys, who Princess Rhaenys on this series is named for. Meraxes and Rhaenys were killed a couple years after the War of Conquest when Aegon tried to conquer Dorne a second time. They were taken down by a scorpion in southern Dorne at Hellholt. What happened is that eventually Meraxes' skull was returned to Aegon during his lifetime. He probably had it enshrined here at Dragonstone. Meraxes, just in general, was very important to the rise of the Targaryens as well, so she'd be a really important figure in the Targaryen history, not just because she was a dragon and dragons were sacred to them, but of all the dragons, she was one of the more important ones because of her role during the conquest itself, but also a lot of the dragons on this show came from Meraxes' dragon eggs, or in some cases, because so much time has gone by since she was alive, some of the younger dragons on the show came from eggs that were laid by dragons that themselves came from Meraxes. So a lot of the younger dragons are like Meraxes' grandchildren. The only other really huge dragon skull that we've seen on the show so far is Balerian's, and his skull is at the Red Keep and is much larger than this skull. This book that Rhaenyra pulls out and starts reading is of Aegon and his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys. The story shows Visenya on Vhagar, and the other page tells basically of Aegon's history, starting with the Century of Blood, which is like the 100 years after the Doom of Valyria. Then it gets into Aegon's attempts to conquer Dorne, and again, I think it's basically leading up to the eventual death of Meraxes and his other sister wife Rhaenys. She and Mysaria bond over Daemon being a dirtbag to both of them. She is correct when she assumes Otto Hightower burned her house. That was him that was responsible for that. When she eventually lets her leave on the Corwin, it's named after Corlys's brother, who Daemon beheaded during Season 1. She winds up clocking Auric Cargill coming in because she literally just saw Eric, the other twin, and goes back to alert Eric so that he can save Rhaenyra, giving us the Cargill Bowl, the Battle of the Cargill Twins. Big moment in the books, and obviously Eric winds up winning, but because he's so guilt-stricken over having killed his brother, he still loves his brother still loves him. It was his brother that was winning briefly who said, "I'm sorry I have to do this, I still love you." He winds up killing himself. And one of the other things they don't really get into, they kind of allude to this in previous episodes too, is that kinslaying is one of the worst possible things you could actually do. So he's just so utterly remorseful for what's happened between him and his brother that he kills himself. During their fight, also important, Otto Hightower lets Aegon know that Viserys didn't actually name him his heir. A lot of people will be confused about this because you wonder if Alicent told them what Viserys said during his dying breaths. The way the showrunner alluded to this is that the rest of the Green Council maybe did not totally believe what Alicent said. Yeah, he says a lot of things. And even if he cursed Alicent and his children with her in his dying breaths, they still would have put Aegon on the Iron Throne. So essentially, he's trying to tell Aegon here, the reason why you became king is because of me. There's a big standoff between them, with Otto Hightower also trying to get real with him, that he's openly mocked, nobody thinks he's a great king. That's why they had those scenes of him during episode 1 listening to the petitions, showing him how Otto Hightower had to explain to him why they could do certain things, why they couldn't do other things. No, this is going to cause problems for us later on, we have to do things this way. But also, as we saw during episode 1, Aegon's inner circle of friends, not so subtly joking that he could and should do whatever he wanted to as king. Nobody should try to control him, which is getting into Joffrey territory, although Aegon hasn't quite got to that point yet, he's not gone full Joffrey yet. But he's realizing he doesn't have to listen to Otto Hightower or Alicent if he doesn't want to, so if he wants revenge, he gets revenge, leading to him firing Otto Hightower as Hand of the King. Rhys Ifans had an amazing performance during the episode. You can see on his face as he's watching all this go down, Aegon is totally destroying this grand plan that he had for the Greens, or any plan that he might have had at one point. And there was a lot of debate about why he was so aggressively wanting Aegon on the Iron Throne. Is this just for his own personal gain? Is this just because he wants to support House Hightower? Why does he want Aegon particularly on the throne so badly? But if they didn't make it clear during Season 1, Otto Hightower and Rhaenyra on both sides of this are trying to do everything they can to actually avoid any actual war. If they actually did come to war, it would burn the realm to the ground. She doesn't want to rule over the ashes. Daenerys also winds up saying that later in the timeline. Ironically, she winds up burning King's Landing. So you can see that on his face, Otto Hightower here lamenting what's going to happen, what he feels like is eventually going to happen. It's basically going to destroy the realm. This is going to be bad for both sides. To be fair though, technically this is all his fault. He's the person who orchestrated all these things, usurping the throne from Rhaenyra to start with. So he has only himself to blame. then promptly makes Criston Cole his next Hand of the King. That seems like a really wise judgment. Sure, that's not going to backfire on him. Let's make the biggest trash bag on the show responsible for running the realm. Sure, he's going to make things way, way better. Then they end the episode with Alicent getting it on with Criston Cole again, who's literally waiting for her in her bed out of his armor. Welcome to the most toxic relationship in Westeros, who basically hate screw each other. Man, I really hate that guy. If there's any other Easter eggs or references you spotted in the episode that I didn't mention in the video, just write them below in the comments. My episode 3 trailer video will post next, and my full episode 3 video will post next week after they release it. I've got a few bonus videos I'm working on for all of Helena's dragon dreams. There are a lot, like she actually saw Jon Snow, Daenerys, Robert's Rebellion, a bunch of other stuff. There's a bunch of cool new lore they canonized for Daenerys the Dreamer on the show too, and I just posted my video for the Night of the Seven Kingdoms teaser that they released. That series is going to release early next year, so I'll post a link for that down in the description below. Everybody click here for my episode 3 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that, and click here for all my House of the Dragon episode videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.